Frankenstein. Chapter 4. Feeling Alone. Not long after that, I went hungrily out into the forest one day. I found a bag with 3 books in it under a tree. Over time, I learned to read from these books. When I first arrived at the DeLacy's hut, I found something in one of my coat pockets. This coat, you remember, came from your rooms in Ingolstadt. It was your journal. Now I could read, so I took it out and read it. How did my life begin? That journal told me. You, Victor Frankenstein, were my maker. You made me from dead body parts. I felt ill when I read that. I couldn't forget the hate in your eyes when you first looked at me. And the villagers were afraid of me and ran away too. I hated being alone. Soon after that, I decided to speak to the DeLacys. Perhaps they can be my friends, I thought. I decided to speak to the old blind father first. He can't see my terrible face and body, so when we talk, he can listen to a man, not see a monster. Some days later, Felix, Safi, and Agatha went out for a walk. They left old Monsieur DeLacy at home. I decided to speak to him then. When I arrived at his front door, he heard me. "Who's that?" he called. "Come in." I went in. "I'm a traveller," I said, "and I'd like to sit by your fire." "Then sit," said the old man. "Are you hungry? My children are out, and I'm blind. But do you want to eat?" "No, thank you," I answered. I sat down next to him. "Are you French?" he asked. "No, but I learned to speak from a French family. It's my only language." "I see," said the old man. "And where are you travelling now?" "I'm going to visit some friends. I need their help. I'm all alone in life, but I'm afraid." "Of what?" he asked. "Perhaps they aren't going to help me when they see me." "Why? A man's friends must help him when he needs it." "But perhaps in their eyes I'm a monster." "How can they think that? I must speak to them. Where do they live?" "Near here," I answered. Suddenly I heard Safi, Felix, and Agatha at the door. I quickly took the old man's hand and said, "You are my friends. You and Felix and Agatha. Speak to your children. I'm a good man, not a monster. Please tell them." "What? Who are you?" cried the old man. Just then, Felix, Safi, and Agatha came in and saw me. Agatha screamed. Safi ran away, and Felix began hitting me. "You monster, leave my father alone," he cried. With a terrible cry, I ran into the forest. I hate humans, I thought darkly, but most of all I hate my maker, Victor Frankenstein. I went back to the Lacey's house for my things later. They left the next morning and never came back. I decided to travel to the Frankenstein family's home in Geneva. When I was on the Geneva road, I saw a young girl by a river in the forest. She suddenly fell in. I went in the river after her and took her in my arms. Then I carried her out of the water and put her down near the river. She couldn't open her eyes, but she was alive. Just then a young man arrived. He saw me with the girl. "You monster, take your hands off of her," he cried. Then he took the girl in his arms and ran away with her. When I went after them, the young man attacked me with a gun. Angrily, I ran away. I arrived near Lake Geneva that evening. There, at Plain Pelée, I met a young boy. He was not afraid of me. "Do you know Alphonse Frankenstein's house in Geneva?" I asked him. "Yes," he answered. "Alphonse Frankenstein's my father." I was suddenly very angry. I took the boy in my hands and strangled him. He wore a locket, I saw. I took this from his dead body. Then I went and quickly put it in a young woman's pocket. She sat and half slept under a tree not far away. I could listen no more. "So you killed my young brother William, and you put the locket in Justine Morit's pocket?" I said. "But why?" "I hate humans. I want to hurt them all, and you more than any man alive," he answered. "You're a monster," I cried. "Am I? You made me and then left me. Humans are afraid of me. I have no friends. I need a wife, a female monster. With a wife I can be happy. I can take her far away, and you and your family can be free of me. Make me a wife for me, Victor Frankenstein." "All right," I promised. "Good," said the monster. "I'm going to watch your work from far away and wait. Then, when my wife's ready, I'm going to come for her." With that, he left the hut and ran away across the glacier. I arrived back at the village of Chamonix that night. The next day, I traveled to Geneva. I needed to see my family. Chapter 5. to England, Scotland, and Ireland. I was worried on the road to Geneva. Now I must make a second monster, I thought. When I arrived home, my father saw my worried face. What's the matter? He asked. Nothing, father, I answered. Victor, please understand. Your mother, before she died, dreamt of a wedding between you and Elizabeth. I too have this dream, but perhaps you don't want to marry her. Perhaps in your eyes she's nothing more than a sister to you. Am I right? Do you feel that? Then tell me, and let's forget this dream. No, father, I want to marry Elizabeth, I answered, but I must do something important before our wedding. What's that? Asked my father. I'd like to visit England, I said. I couldn't tell him about the monster and my terrible promise to him, but I wanted to make the female monster in a country far away from my family in Switzerland. All right, then go, said my father, but please take a friend with you. What about Henry Clerval? So in the end, Henry came with me. We travelled through Germany to Holland and then went across the sea by ship to England. We stayed in London for some weeks. Henry visited all the famous buildings. I met and talked with a number of famous English men of science. Soon I was ready for the creation of a second monster. After some time, a letter arrived for us from a Scottish friend. He asked us to his house in Perth. So Henry and I left England and travelled up to Scotland. But I left Henry with our friends in Perth and went further north alone, to one of the Scottish islands. I took a little house there and began to work on the creation of a new female monster from dead body parts. I worked day and night on this second creature, but I was very worried. Is my first monster going to be happy with her? I thought one night. Or perhaps she's not going to be happy with him. What then? Am I truly going to be free of them? Perhaps in time they're going to have children, a family of terrible monsters. How can I stop that? Oh, why did I promise to do this? Then I looked up and saw the creature at the open window. He was there. The monster smiled a dark smile at me, and I felt afraid. I'm doing something terrible, I suddenly thought. I looked down at the female monster's body on the table before me, and there and then I began to destroy my creation. No, cried the monster, you cannot break your promise to me. I can and I do, I answered. Why can every man have a wife, but I must have nobody? I wanted to find love, and you give me hate. But remember this, I can hurt you. I'm not afraid of you, I cried. Your dream of a female monster is over. Nothing can change that. Now go. Be careful, he said. I came after you through Germany, Holland, England, and Scotland. You can never leave me behind. I'm going to be with you on your wedding night. And with that, the monster left the island in his boat. The next day, a letter came for me from Henry. Victor, Perth isn't very interesting. Come and meet me soon. Let's travel to Ireland. Your friend, Henry. I decided to leave the island the next morning. That night, I carried the parts of the female creature's body to a little boat. I took them out to sea and I put them quickly into the dark waters. After that, I suddenly felt very tired and closed my eyes. I slept for many hours in the boat. When I opened my eyes again, my boat was on the open sea. The sun was hot and I was very thirsty. Am I going to die here? I thought worriedly. Where am I? Is this the Atlantic? But some time later, my boat came near to land, and soon I arrived at a little town by the sea. There he is, some of the people from the town cried when I got out of my boat. That's the killer. Is this England? I asked. No, Ireland. They took me at once to Mr. Kerwin, the town judge. What's the matter? I asked him. Last night, Mr. Kerwin said, a man with a little boat strangled somebody down by the sea. He left the body here, and now you come here in your little boat. So, are you the strangler? For many of the people in town, you are. But let's see. Come and look at the dead man. I went with him into the next room. The dead body of my good friend Henry Clerval was there on the table. No, I cried. He did this. The monster. I closed my eyes and fell down suddenly, and I was very ill with a fever for the next 2 months. Slowly I began to feel better. When I opened my eyes, I was in a prison bed. Mr. Kerwin stood by me. Ah, you're back with us. That's good because you have a visitor, he said. It's the monster, I thought. He's here because he wants to laugh about Clover's death. I can't see him, I cried. Chapter 6. Revenge and Death. What's the matter with you? Asked Mr. Kerwin. Your father's here from Geneva. I found a letter from him in your pocket when you were ill and wrote to him. He came at once, and he wants to see you." "Oh, I see," I answered. "Of course you can bring my father in." My father came in, and we talked. "Are you alive and well then, and Elizabeth and Ernest too?" "Yes, everyone at home is alive and well," he answered, "but it's sad news about Clerval." "Yes, my poor friend. I killed him, you know, father. Him and Justine and William. I killed them all." "Never say that, Victor. You're ill, and you've got a fever. You were on a Scottish island when Clerval died. You didn't kill him." My father stayed with me for 3 months, and I slowly felt better. When I was well again, I went before the judge. He listened carefully to the lawyer's questions and everybody's answers. Then he spoke. "This man did not kill Henry Clerval," he said, "and so I came out of prison a free man." Soon after that, my father and I went by ship to France. From there, we travelled to Geneva. "Forget Clerval's sad death, Victor," said my father, "and marry Elizabeth." Back in Geneva, Elizabeth and I began making plans for our wedding. But what did the monster say to me on the Scottish island? "I'm going to be with you on your wedding night." I could not forget that. Perhaps he wants to attack me and kill me on that night, I thought, so I began carrying a gun with me in my coat pocket at all times. I wanted to be ready when the monster attacked me. I didn't understand then his terrible plans for me and for my family. I told Elizabeth, "Cousin, there's a terrible secret in my life. I can't speak of it now, but I can tell you all about it after we marry." She looked worried, but did not ask me more about it. On the day of the wedding, my father was very happy. Elizabeth was quiet and looked sadly beautiful, and I, for a time, forgot to feel afraid. After the wedding in Geneva, we planned to go and stay at an inn in Evian. We took a boat across the lake and arrived at the inn at 8 o'clock in the evening. Just then, the weather changed and there was a sudden storm over our heads. I felt worried and I put my hand on the gun in my coat pocket. "What are you afraid of, husband?" asked Elizabeth. "Once this terrible night is past, I can be free, my love," I answered her. But my wife cannot see the monster's attack on me, I thought. So I told her, "Please go upstairs to bed, Elizabeth. I can't sleep now. Later perhaps I can come to you." She went up to her room. I stayed downstairs and walked up and down with the gun in my hand, but I saw nothing of the monster and began to feel happier. Then suddenly I heard a woman's screams from upstairs. "Elizabeth!" I cried. I ran up to her room and quickly opened the door. My wife was there, dead, on the bed. Her long hair was half over her white face, and the window was open to the cold, dark night. "Her killer left through that window," I cried. Then I fell down at the end of the bed, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, lots of people from the inn were by the bed. I looked over to the window, saw the face of the monster there. He looked across at my dead wife. Then he looked back at me and gave a terrible smile. I got up at once and ran to the window with my gun in my hand, but the creature ran quickly away from the inn and across the snow down to the lake. Some of the men from the inn and I ran after him, but we could not catch him. They brought me back, tired, to the inn. I slept on a bed there for some time. Then I got up. I was worried for the lives of my father and my brother Ernest. "I must go back to Geneva tonight," I cried. So I left Evian and travelled back to my father's house. My father and Ernest were alive and well when I arrived, but when I told my father about Elizabeth's sudden death, he took it very badly. The sad and terrible news destroyed him. He went to bed with a fever that night, and he died in my arms 3 days later. I went mad after that, and they put me in a hospital for mad people for many weeks. When I was better, my brother Ernest came for me, and I was a free man once more. But I was very angry with the monster. I wanted revenge for the deaths of William, Justine, Henry, Elizabeth, and my father. I went to a Geneva lawyer, but he could do nothing for me, so I decided to go after the monster and to destroy him before he could hurt me any more. I left Geneva hungry for news of the creature. I went after him to Russia and north to the Arctic. Then I arrived at your ship, Robert Walton, and you took me half dead from my sled and brought me here. Thank you for that, and thank you for listening to my story." Robert Walton, the English man of science, looked sadly across at the poor man on the bed. He felt very sorry for Victor Frankenstein, with his white face and his dark, mad eyes. What a terrible story! But is it all true? He thought. "I'm going to die soon, I feel it," Frankenstein said. "So please promise me one thing, my friend." All right, but what? Asked Walton. After I'm dead, you must go after the monster and you must take revenge on him for me. Promise me this one thing, and I can die a happy man. Very well, I promise, said Walton. Frankenstein died the next morning. That afternoon, Walton's men spoke to him. Let's leave this land of snow and cold seas and go back home to England when we can. Walton listened to them and decided to take his ship south when the sea broke. Science isn't everything, he thought. Family and friends are important too, and I'd like to see my sister Margaret again soon. That afternoon, Walton heard a noise in the next room, the room with Frankenstein's dead body in it. Is someone crying there? He thought. He quickly opened the door and went into the room. Frankenstein's monster stood by the bed, and terrible cries came from his open mouth. What are you doing here? Asked Walton angrily. I'm crying for my dead maker, the monster answered. How can you say that after everything that you did to him? Cried Walton. You destroyed his life. I know, and I'm sorry for it now, the monster said. I wasn't born a killer. I hated strangling Clerval, but then, back in Switzerland, I heard about Victor's wedding plans and I felt very angry. He destroyed the female monster before my eyes on that Scottish island. How could he marry when I was without a wife? I killed Elizabeth in revenge, and I thought nothing of it, but now I can kill no more. The monster looked down sadly at Frankenstein's dead body on the bed before him. I'm going to travel north now on my sled, he said, and when I come to the coldest part of this cold land, I'm going to make a big fire and finish my sad life in it. Goodbye. And with that, the monster quickly left the room through the open window, and his dog sled soon took him far away across the snow and ice.